Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Talk and Draw with Patrick Scullin, Travis Hanson, and special guest Chad Frye.
Hey,
Welcome, Chad.
hey, thanks. Happy to
we're
be
so,
here.
yes, and we're excited to have you. This is my favorite part of the week is getting together with some buddies to draw and talk. I should say to talk and draw. That's our official name. Um, but Chad comes to us with a really great background. You've worked for Disney, you've worked in motion pictures, you worked in TV animation. You've even done some work for Netflix in Green Eggs and Ham recently, right?
Yeah.
Storyboarding, character design, a variety of things, right?
Yep.
Worked on my favorite movie, Emperor's New Groove. I still go to that.
That's good. It's
That's
nice. It's nice that people discover that once it came out on video.
Oh, the movie's fantastic.
so. As always, we're excited to have someone with your background join us that we can talk art and also, just learn about your drawing techniques. That's what I think is really fun about this is we can kind of pick your brain, but then also watch you draw and see what keeps you going.
All right.
I'm going to turn
A lot of caffeine. That's the
caffeine. That is one of the common denominators we found in this show is coffee seems to drive a lot of artists.
yeah.
I've got my Diet Mountain Dew. That's my
Right.
poison.
I'm a Mexican Coke guy.
So Travis, why don't you take it away and explain our drawing challenge today?
Awesome. Well, today we're going to draw monsters, any kind of monsters. We're just going to have fun with it and just see where it goes and see some different character or creature design. So I'll start off like normal.
And while Travis is setting up his screen, getting his drawing underway, I'm going to introduce our discussion topic. And today we thought we'd talk about the importance of artist mentors and maybe talk a little bit about some of our mentors that kind of helped us along our careers, but then also how we might give back. So I'm curious, Chad, did you have any mentors in your experience that helped you out?
Yeah. When I was a kid, I would say that I was a kid who grew up in New Jersey. So I'll start with that. But I didn't realize what I lived near. I didn't live that far away from the Joe Kubert School. But I didn't discover that until I was already in high school, that existed, because there wasn't anybody in my life really that was art related. So how do you know about something like that unless you have somebody tell you?
Wow.
But yeah, so that was, I don't know, that was probably about 8 miles away or so, something like that. So I didn't really know about that or any other cartoonists in the area. I discovered many years later that my kindergarten bus driver was a cartoonist.
Really?
He did a panel cartoon on the back of every issue of National Enquirer.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
I had Mr. Westling was his name. I don't remember what his first name was, but because we called him Mr. It's funny how that worked when you were.
Those
5
were
years old.
those
Yeah.
were different times.
Yeah. We had respect for our elders. But yeah, he was a fun guy, but I had no idea he was a cartoonist. So the first cartoonist I ever met that I was aware of was a cartoonist. I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. He went to my grandmother's church down in Florida, and his name was Al Hartley. And Al was known to me as a guy who did Christian comic books. He's the guy who did Christian Archie books.
Oh, how
okay.
cool.
He did a lot of biography books like Johnny Cash with his conversion to Christianity. And in fact, I saw some of his art in a recent documentary about Johnny Cash's first wife.
Really?
Yeah, he did a lot of like The Cross and the Switchblade. He did a comic book adaptation of that, stuff like that. So, but he went to my grandmother's church, and and she introduced me to him because she knew of my interest, and I had his comics. But one of her best friends was his mother-in-law, so it was funny how all that worked.
Small
And
world.
he ended up being my first mentor and was tremendous help to me. I mean, because when we're kids, we all draw terrible, and kids' interests change over the years too. You never quite know what you're going to do, even though you might say you like drawing. But yeah, he was always encouraging me every time I went down to see Grandma in Florida on trips. It was really great. He did and I found out. I wish I had known when he was still alive because I would have asked him. He died in 2003, but his career started with like Timely Comics and Atlas, and he worked directly with Stan Lee on stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I had no idea about that part of his career until after he had passed. So it was great, though. I think the best memory I have of him mentoring me in a way is I think I was around 10 or 11. I think it was fourth grade project for school or something. We had to interview somebody. And so on a trip to Grandma's, I went over to his house and interviewed him about cartooning. And well, he just sat there all afternoon giving me amazing advice and telling me things I didn't even know to ask, So that was it was pretty great.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I had a similar experience where, growing up in my family, nobody knew anything about comics or cartooning, but my mom always did her best to like connect me with people in our area that were in comics or animation and stuff. I met Mike Hodgson, who worked for Disney and other places, and Steve Gordon and other people like that they happened to live in my little town.
Yeah.
That was always good.
That's cool.
Mine was just my mom. It would be my biggest. She was a China painter,
Oh,
and always,
like plates and stuff?
yeah, and tile and ceramics, and actually invented a technique that would allow you to use China paint and ceramic glaze simultaneously,
Oh, wow.
and mainly flowers and stuff. But I learned so much from her to just draw. She would always give me opportunities to draw, and then
cool.
I didn't meet really anybody in the industry until I was about 23, 24, and that's when I first met people that I started to gravitate to, because it just wasn't in my area.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Riverside.
Oh, so here in
Yeah.
California. Wow.
But when I just was kind of just on my own, and I like to draw and create, and never realized that this would be the path that I would end up going.
Yeah.
And it's funny though, I ran into Bill Stout years and years ago, and he would actually, I would say, almost be my first mentor, the first one to really just get me going. And what's funny is he challenged somebody else and was telling them all these things that they needed to do and how they should be an independent and stuff like that. And I was this scared little kid sitting on the side. And then years later, I was able to walk up to Bill and go, "Hey, you don't remember me? You were giving advice to somebody else. I don't know if he took it, but I did. Here's my first book." And
That's cool.
so yeah, and that's kind of where that began.
That's awesome. When I was a senior in high school, my art teacher was friends with the Hildebrandt brothers.
Oh, wow.
Specifically,
Wow.
Greg had been his best man at his wedding. And
Oh, wow.
so my high school art teacher set up a meet with them, and come to find out their studio was like a couple miles away from where I was living. So I ended up getting to know them and hanging out with them a little bit at their studio, just watching them paint. It was amazing. It really was amazing. They had this sweet setup. It was like in an office building next to a man-made pond, and they had a giant window that looked out over the pond. And the two of them were in the studio together, just painting away. And this was when they were doing, they had already done a bunch of those fairy tale children's books at that point, and they were working on their first Star Wars. They were starting, I think it was the first Star Wars card set that they did, trading cards. So I was there watching them paint Star Wars paintings, and later I saw them painting like Marvel. They did a set of Marvel cards, and I watched them paint some of that stuff. It was really great. And then I moved away. It seemed like every Christmas I'd go back and visit them, and we'd sit and chat while they worked. It was really great. Kind of like this, except there were no cameras involved.
No cameras at all.
And I wasn't drawing because, yeah, it was their studio and they were good. I was not.
Well, speaking of which, you know, that's kind of why I like what we're doing. You know, back when we were kids, this wasn't possible. We didn't have these kind of connections. But it's nice that we can kind of share our studios and our thoughts with anybody that cares to listen. Because that was really beneficial to me. Like you said, sitting and talking and listening to somebody teach you about their technique or their career or give you advice.
Yeah.
I'm glad we have the internet for that, you know?
Same here.
Yeah. It's made the world a smaller place, that's for sure.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. It's harder to hide.
So from some of these mentors or teachers or guides, you know, have you guys, what's your best advice? Any artistic advice that stands out that you got that made a difference?
You know, for me, it was I met an artist at San Diego Comic-Con one year, and I really stressed go to the conventions just to meet the artist and talk to him and stuff. And I can remember showing a portfolio to one of them and him asking me, you know, two very important questions that have really stuck to me. The first one was why I wasn't published, and I didn't have an answer. And the second question he asked me was, how bad do you want it? And right before I could tell him, he told me to shut up. And he said, if you want this bad enough, you'll show me how you'll make it happen. And that has stuck with me my entire career. And the next year I came back with published work. I've never looked back.
That's cool. That's a pretty good question to ask somebody. I've never heard of that before. That's cool.
Prove it.
Yeah.
And I use that actually a lot with young creators and old creators too. It's probably one of the best questions I have ever been asked. And I mean, you can apply it to almost anything.
Especially now that you can self-publish too, you know, and that wasn't really much of a possibility when we were growing up.
Mm-mm. It has so changed.
Yeah.
I
think, oh, go ahead.
I got some monsters here, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't like the first one I was sketching, so I started again.
I did too, actually. I had a totally different idea halfway through, and I'm like, oh, crap, I got to start over. But have you ever gotten any good advice, Chad?
Yeah, you know, one that always stuck with me was from that interview I did with Al when I was so young. And I've repeated it to people today, so it's kind of appropriate to mention it now, is he didn't ask me, you know, why aren't you published? Because, you know, I was like 10 or 11. But what he said was the way to know you're an artist, you know, is that it's not just your mom saying that your work is good. So,
wait, what? That's not good enough.
So I took that to heart as a kid because that was great advice to give to a little kid, because every little kid knows, you know, your mom will put whatever you do on the refrigerator, but it takes a more objective person who doesn't love you because they gave birth to you to say that your work is good, and that those are the people you need to be trying to impress, not your mom.
That was my dad.
Great. I love impressing my mom. To this day, I love impressing my mom.
But it's easy, right?
Yeah. It doesn't have to be that good, and you know, because she has to love it because she loves you, you know, that kind of thing. So, well, she loves me. She doesn't know you guys. So yeah, I always thought that was really good advice, just as far as how to gauge where you are. Today, though, I'll tell kids, because I don't know about you guys, I get asked all the time by younger artists who haven't gotten into the business yet. They all want to be visual development artists or character designers in animation. That seems to be the big thing that everybody wants to do. And they have something that we didn't have when we were kids. And I always tell them, I say, okay, well, if that's what you want to do, um, does your work look as good as the work that they're publishing in these art of books? You know, that those art of books didn't exist when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I think the first time I saw anything like that was when Frank and Ollie wrote The Illusion of Life, which, by the way, Tim Hildebrandt did the cover for that Pinocchio painting. It was
Oh,
Tim.
wow.
Really?
Yeah, but I had never seen books about animation until that book came out. And that didn't really, I mean, it had lots of artwork in it, of course, but it was more instructional on the general principles of animation. But now, you know, I think The Lion King might have been the first big art of book that I had seen. And that thing is just loaded with amazing artwork that you never see on the film itself. You know, it's all that pre-production stuff. And if, as a young artist, if your work doesn't look like what's in those kinds of books, then you don't have the ability to be a visual development artist right at this moment. But that is something to strive for. You got to look at it like that. So I had a very rude awakening. I wanted to become a Disney artist in the worst way by the time I was in high school. And my junior year of college, I had an opportunity to go down to the Florida studio, which existed at the time for Disney, to show my portfolio to a guy who worked there. And I hadn't seen any of these art of books yet because they hadn't started coming out. And just walking around the halls and seeing the artwork on the walls, I realized I had no chance. My work was definitely not at that level. And when he when he looked at my portfolio, he just flip, 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 flip. He never dwelt on any page whatsoever. And I was like, yeah, I don't blame him. My stuff stunk. So that was a very rude awakening to me, but it made me really want to work harder. But I also kind of gave up the dream, and I thought, well, maybe I think I can still work as an artist, but maybe not there. So I kind of gave it up, and as far as making that my life's goal, and I just went and I ended up getting into children's books first out of school, or while I was still in school, actually.
That's awesome. Well, let's switch screens.
Children's books were more forgiving.
Yes, they are.
Well, before we switch, Travis, you want to explain what you did?
I did a bunch of monsters. I finished one. And I'm like, well, I'll add another one, and then I'll add another one, and then it just kept growing. Now I'll add one in the front. But
so what I'm curious, because I've watched you draw forever, and I'm just wondering, you know, how, the variety here is really nice. So do you make that conscious decision to say, hey, I'm gonna switch it up, or do you just pick one out of your mind and go, you know, I've drawn that one, I'm going to put that one there? I mean, how does it work for you?
So, I got on it. I think Bill Stout's probably my mentor, if I was to really look at it. And I can remember Bill, I was showing him a piece that I was working on, and all the bottles were different. And Bill told me, he goes, that is the way to do it. He goes, nothing looks the same. And so I have a hard time trying to make everything the same. I got to have it different. I have to have a uniqueness about it. So everything kind of has its own creation and its own life to it. And I've always held to that one where even looking at this one, I'm thinking, okay, I didn't want just the same monsters. I wanted it to be as unique as possible. So each one was a different one. So I would change the shape up a little bit and just try to figure out a different feel for it. And kind of just got where we had. But I did want to have kind of like a Cyclops, a centaur-like kind of creature. So, you know, I kind of had an idea of one. Maybe it's because I'm wearing my my core guitar shirt. but half man, half corgi. But I like being able to. I like things having uniqueness to it and to be different from each other, and that's kind of why I approached it this way.
That's great.
That's very cool.
So, all right, let's
How about
jump.
you, Chad? You ready to go? You want to share with us?
Yeah, well, it hasn't gotten very far because I've been talking so much. You guys are
That's
used
our
to
evil
talking.
little plan.
Yeah, you guys are talking and drawing at the same time here, very expertly.
We've had a lot of Coca-Cola and Mountain Dew today, probably.
And you do this more than I do with the talk and draw thing. All right, so let me see what I got here. All right. Yeah,
All right.
well, I can show. I started one that I was just like, I don't know, and I gave up, and then I started over again with something else. So
I like that, though.
yeah,
I like the line work. It's very crisp.
well, it's just sketching. You know, I like using in Photoshop here. I like using those Kyle brushes, and my go-to one now for sketching is a gouache one. It's boy, I just forgot which one it was called. Gouache G Beauty. That's
Oh,
the
wow.
one I use that one all the time now for sketching. I do storyboarding, and if I'm drawing in Photoshop, that's the one I'll use because it'll have a little rough edge to it, which is nice. See if I can blow up this.
I
So
like
do
it.
you do the
It's got a
typical?
little rough edge to it, and you can control the flow to give it more of a rough edge, you know.
That's nice.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily a pencil, but it's not just a flat brush either, you know. So that's one I like.
And you're doing this all in Photoshop, which is pretty amazing.
So do
Yeah.
you like to do kind of a hatchy line and then revise it over time? What's your process?
Yeah. Especially if we're talking about illustration, I often will do a very sketchy line first, and then I'll go back in and start finessing on another layer in Photoshop. So I'm not doing that today because we're just sketching, but yeah, because if I'm worried about when you're doing illustration or even when you're doing storyboards, you're worried about composition. So I'm not just going to go in and start drawing the character. I got to go in and draw shapes first, make sure everything's placed where it needs to be, and then I'll start working out the details.
I
So
love that nose.
storyboarding, you gotta really kick butt because you gotta draw tons of drawings. It's not uncommon to do 100, 200 panels in a week, you know. So you have to really work as fast as you can, but accurately too, because you're telling a story with it, sequential story. So yeah, but it's fun.
How does your process change for storyboards? Do you is there any tips you have for getting faster or working under that kind of a workload?
Well, since storyboarding has gone all digital these days, what's really nice is you reuse backgrounds.
Sure.
In the days when we did it on paper, sometimes you'd have to draw the background on every frame if you had a director that was picky that way. Most of them would let you just draw the outline of stuff and just put an SA on the screen that said meant same as. So you draw the background in the first panel and then you wouldn't worry about it the rest of the time. Sometimes it involved the use of a photocopy machine and reworking everything. So it was much different on paper. So now with digital, we have backgrounds in all the drawings instead of piecemeal. So that certainly has changed. And you know, it's got its pluses and minuses. You know, now you can add color to it where that wasn't as common back on paper days. But most people don't really want you to do color because they leave that to the color designers and the art directors to figure out later.
And do you do any kind of value or shading, or do you keep it line art in your storyboarding, or does it change?
It depends. I mean, if you're telling something, if you're doing something in a story where lighting is an important part of the storytelling at that point, whether you got a lightning storm or, you know, sunrise is coming in or something and you just need to show it, then sometimes you got to add in that stuff, whether it's in black and white or sometimes in color. Yeah, so I mean, I did a board a few months ago where I had to make sure it was clear that it was early morning. So I actually put a color sunrise in, but also because it's digital, you can cheat sometimes and just go find a nice picture of it and paste it in the background. Anything to save time, because you just got to get the boards out to tell the story. And, you know, it's all right to grab pictures off the internet and stuff in that process, because that stuff's not going to be seen by the public. That's just for internal use only and planning stuff. And then other artists in the pipeline will come down and figure all that stuff out. So
Now you've worked for several different studios.
yeah.
How is it adapting to each studio's personality?
Yeah, there's always differences wherever you go. Nothing's ever quite the same. So yeah, I mean, you have to try to adapt as quickly as possible so they don't regret hiring you. That's key. Sometimes they like to give you art tests before you even get hired, just to try you out. It's kind of an audition process. I hate the audition process because I don't really feel that that's a great way of getting to know what somebody can do for you. Because sometimes they want you to draw in exactly their style and know exactly what their hopes and wishes are. And you've only just met these people and they only give you a week to do it. And I don't know, sometimes it takes a little bit longer than that to really get up to speed on the style of a particular show. So, yeah, so that's just one of those things. You go to the studio and you just try to get used to what they're doing as quickly as you can. But it is one thing, you know, when we're young cartoonists, and I don't know if this was true for you guys or not, but it seems like it is for a lot of people. You're really beholden to whatever you're doing. You love your own work, and you don't want to have anybody tell you it stinks. You don't want to take criticism. I mean, I've seen this with kids coming to shows and wanting you to look at their portfolios. They don't really want to hear that their work isn't that great. They want to hear how good they are. I think it's very important to be willing to hear how you should improve, because once you get into the animation world, you're working with teams of people. It's not about you. It's about everybody's work together. So it's important to be adaptable, to take instruction, to be humble about it, and to do what you're told when it's coming from someone over you, you know, all that stuff.
I think that's when you finally start to learn how to grow too as an artist.
You do. It ends up being that whole iron sharpeneth iron thing, you know. You're learning from other people just by watching what they're doing and listening to what they say. It's good to have ideas and to be collaborative, but you got to know when to shut up and go, you know what, that's a really good idea, and let's do that. And oh yes, I see how I should improve because of what you're telling me. So yeah, so it's one of those important things.
This is a great piece. I'm really enjoying this monster.
I was going to ask you, what advice would you give new artists, and I think you already did. I think that's
being humble.
yeah, I think that's great advice. And
that was a hard thing to learn.
You know, I had a similar experience as you. I think I was used to the mom critique and was feeling pretty good about my work.
Yeah.
And so when I first started forging into the real world, I realized, I really need to work a little bit harder. I'm not the best.
I bet you were the best on her refrigerator, though.
I was, and I was probably pretty darn close in Mrs. Hanner's art class, but that really isn't going to get you that far.
No.
Man, you guys lucked out. My mom was direct in the critique. This is how it is.
She'd let you have it, huh?
Well, I mean, I got to a point where you don't want to listen, and even because everybody, I think that the drawback is when everybody tells you how good you are, you close up, you stop
Yeah.
listening, and you can't grow. And I can remember when I first started, I was, when we started using the internet quite a bit more to post our work online, and was starting to getting critiques by anonymous, and I was frustrated. And I'm sitting there complaining to my mom, and she said, "Why don't you read this and you tell me, that he's wrong?" And she looks at it and she goes, "He's right. Everything he said is correct." He goes, "You need to understand, he doesn't know who you are. He is talking about an art piece, and you need to learn to separate yourself personally from the piece of artwork you're putting out there."
Exactly.
And that was, once I could do that, then I felt that I started to grow as a creator.
Yeah. I mean,
There's my problem.
my first job in animation was for Disney feature animation, but I was not hired to be an artist there. I was hired. It was kind of at the beginning of the whole digital revolution, and I had come from the East Coast where I was doing a lot of children's books and stuff, and I was asked to come and learn the digital process from them because even I wasn't doing it quite yet. I think Photoshop was in its first version at that stage.
15
And,
discs.
What's that?
15 discs.
Yeah. Well, I remember it had one undo,
Yeah.
and I think you were limited into, well, even at Disney we were limited to 50 layers at one point.
Oh, wow.
I don't remember how many layers when I first started, but anyway, yeah, I got asked to come learn it and then to teach it to the other artists. So that was my foray into working in Hollywood, was being an in-house teacher of digital artistic programs. And it was thrilling, but it was also not exactly what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be creating. So, but I had a long ways to go. Even then I knew I wasn't quite there. So watching what all those guys were doing, just being able to walk the halls and see all the new art constantly being posted. Boy, it's like everybody in the studio was a mentor to me at that time. I was there for 6 years doing that.
Oh, wow.
And by the time that 6 years was up, I was ready to be working on production somewhere, and then I started doing that. So, yeah.
Well, and as long as I've known you, you've also rubbed shoulders with a lot of really great artists. I'm curious if there are any others that come to mind that you want to mention that have either inspired you or encouraged you along the way.
Yeah. In fact, I have this desk behind me, if I can show.
Oh, yeah.
This is it's an old layout desk from Disney Animation.
Oh.
But over against the wall, there's some pictures that I keep taped up there. And some of those pictures, there's a picture of me with Charles Schultz. There's a picture of me with Al Hirschfeld. Some guys like that I keep taped up next to my desk just as inspiration to keep, going and doing what I can. So yeah, I would say Al Hirschfeld was a real thrill to get to know. I met him at an NCS Rubin Awards in New York City in 1996, I think, maybe. It was 95, 96, something like that. He was at the Rubin Awards, and I was a huge fan of his work to begin with, and there he was in might have been in his 80s at the time. And after that, next time I was in New York City, I realized I want to keep this going. I want to talk to that guy some more. Turns out he was listed in the Manhattan phone book. So I just called him up. He answered the phone. He couldn't hear real good, so he's shouting, and I had to shout the other way, we're basically screaming at each other over the phone. But it was like, "Hey, I'm Chad. I met you at the Rubens. I'd love to come talk with you." He goes, "Oh yeah, you're a cartoonist? Sure, come on over." So, so from then on, as much as I moved away from home, I lived in South Carolina and then California. Every Christmas I went home, I would stop in and visit with Al Hirschfeld.
Oh
So
wow.
That's
that was
awesome.
it was amazing. Yeah. So and it was really fun when we were working on Fantasia 2000 at Disney. There was the Rhapsody in Blue sequence, which was based on Al's work. Eric Goldberg directed. Um, and I came back to New York right at Christmas time. They were premiering it at Carnegie Hall for 2 nights. And Al went the first night, so I missed him, but he went the second night. And then we were together at his house the week later. And I was showing him the Art of book, which he hadn't seen yet. And he loved other people's art, I got to tell you. Sometimes I bring him books that I thought were cool, and he'd go, oh, wow. And one time he was looking at a book by illustrator Daniel Adele. And as he's flipping through it, he just stopped and he looked at me and goes, it is so great that illustration is not dead. He had such an appreciation for good stuff that other people were doing, even as he lived up to be 99, so it was really cool.
Oh, what a great memory.
Oh man, he was fantastic. So always loved meeting with him. But yeah, he's one, there's a lot of my heroes have passed away now. I think Will Eisner. One time I drove up to Connecticut and I had lunch with Stan Drake, who drew Blondie for many years. And was it The Heart of Juliet Jones was another strip he did. It was with Stan and a couple other guys, Dick Hodgins, who did Henry at the time, Bill Yates, who had been an editor at King Features, and I'm blanking. There was another artist who was drawing Rip Kirby after Alex Raymond, but he was there too. And just starting to meet the old guys when I was kind of a kid in the business, and just getting to know them that way, because that's the thing I think a lot of kids today that I hear. I'll mention names of these great cartoonists who were honestly their work was already kind of past what was popular when I was a kid, but they don't know who these people are today. And
Yeah.
I think it's so important to know the history of your business, and to appreciate what those guys did and learn from it. And it seems like the people they all appreciate today are the ones who are working prominently now, and they have no idea what came before. The people who are working prominently now and are prominent because of who came before them, and they know it. So it's important to know who created all that stuff before us. So
Yeah. Well, let's jump into Patrick really quick and see what Patrick's drawing.
I don't think we need to do that.
You sure?
We'll see. What do we got going on here though, Chad? What's happening?
oh yeah, I see you're
Little
deflecting.
sidekick?
You're deflecting. Yeah, you're putting off. You're procrastinating.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got a little
I just
sidekick.
started doing a little sidekick. Yeah.
All
So we
right,
need-
guys. Let's see what we get here. Wait for it. So,
Oh, hey.
That's got a very
Nice.
Monsters Inc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun.
when you said monsters, that was the first thing that popped in my head was Monsters Inc.
Stepping on Legos.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. In the beginning, when I was starting it off, I was just drawing this dopey monster, but then somewhere along the way, I was like, oh, I got to put like a kid in the bedroom, and then I was like, what if he left his Legos out? So that's kind of where my mind went, and I had to kind of start over.
That's awesome.
But I
Really
was thinking about that.
This is great. I like the monster design you got going there, Patrick, quite a bit.
Yeah. There's a lot of appeal there.
Well, and that's something I think I've learned just talking to different artists in the past few weeks. We've started this thing is talking about variety and silhouettes and exaggeration. And so I made a conscious choice to say, okay, how do I exaggerate this? Make his body tapered, make his head large, whatever.
Well,
I don't consider myself a monster artist at all. So I just let it ride.
Well, it's kind of like when Eddie was talking about shapes and the importance of
Yeah,
utilizing shapes, and I like how you've got your shape there.
thanks. Um,
So I got a question for Chad. I'm really curious. Is there a project that stands out that you enjoyed the most working on it?
Hmm, that's a
Or
tough
is
one.
or a story that just was just so much fun?
I I think I think things that were the most fun don't necessarily have to do with what's in the project as so much as where I was in life at the time.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Oh, wow,
So,
I like that.
so like my first children's book, I don't think I've ever been thrilled more than that first project because it was my first. You look at it today and it's not very well done, but um, at least, by comparison of how I work now. But uh, there was just such a thrill to know that I was working on something for the first time that I hadn't done before. And then seeing it in print on the shelves at bookstores, I've never had a feeling like that since. That was just tremendous, you know. And while I didn't draw for it, I was involved with Disney's Mulan. That was my first big, animated project. And I mean, I love the movie is really wonderful, but I think I have a certain affection for that over anything else because it was my first. So I think I have those kinds of feelings about stuff for where I was, not necessarily
What it was.
what it was. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
you guys
So
ever get any bad advice over the years?
Yeah.
hmm, usually from people who want to take advantage of me.
Yeah.
That too.
How do you watch out for that?
You
learn
know,
to learn to say no.
Ah,
and sometimes listening to that bad advice can be quite painful. Everyone tells you what they think you should be doing maybe in the publishing world, and it's not what you want to do. I learned that the hard way. I wanted to do comics, and they said, well, maybe you should draw it as an illustrated novel instead. And I listened, and it was the most miserable, financial, destructive thing I've ever done for me. And once I took a year off, and I realized, I said, no, I got to go back to the way I originally wanted. I should not have listened. I should have listened to my gut when I was designing that piece, and I should have followed my gut. So I've learned to be a lot more cautious. Of it's important to take advice, but it's also important to listen to your gut at the same time, especially when you're creating your own project.
Yeah.
how do you know when to tell the difference between, kind of that ego, but then also, that good inspiration that's saying, don't listen to the crowd, go this way. How do you tell the difference between that and maybe even, ego where you're not listening to good advice? You know what I mean?
It took an Eisner nod for me.
Well, for those of us who haven't earned an Eisner, um,
I didn't earn it. I didn't earn it.
That's a good way to deal with it though.
Yeah, because it validated my original decision where I should have listened to it the first time. Now, other times I've just, you watch how the project grows and you see the success of the project, and sometimes that's another good indicator. Or, I mean, it might fail too, but I think it just depends on if you can walk away happy from it the way you really wanted it to be, then it doesn't matter what the end result sometimes is.
Yeah.
I think that I don't know how to explain it, but there is a part of you as you gain more confidence and experience in your career where you realize um, you can take advice from a lot of areas, but at some point you have to be the one that says, I'm going to go this way. You always got to be open. Like we've talked about, you got to be open to critique. You got to be open to good advice. But on some level, if something inside is saying, no, I really think that's the direction I need to go, I think you got to follow it. And maybe, like you said, Travis, that's That's when it gets validated down the road. It may not be an immediate thing. You may not know for a while if you made the right decision, but in the end, you got to listen to yourself sometimes.
But also, I think Chad brought up a really great point. When you're working in a studio, you don't have sometimes that luxury to be, go with that gut of I want to do it my way. You're working with so many different people and somebody that eventually is making all the decisions, and that might not be you.
That's
Yeah. And so that's when you stomp your feet and you throw a tantrum until they give you what you want, right?
I don't know. I think they get you fired.
Yeah, I was going to say, if they keep you employed.
That always works for me.
This is great. I like this, Patrick. You got a nice form here and a little story.
Thanks. Yeah, that's actually something I've been trying to add to my drawings too, is I always try to add a little story.
That's a good thing. I don't always think that way when I'm doing sketchbook stuff,
It's not something I do naturally either, because I tend to, I think, focus on maybe like a beauty shot or something, and then
Yeah.
that's it. But I think people respond to a story. So,
Well, we are natural storytellers, and that's how we kind of express ourselves to each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
great.
so-
Go ahead.
So
Sorry, Chad.
basically everything I'm sketching right now is just junk. It has no story to it. Thanks, Patrick.
Oh, yep. That's what I'm here to motivate,
Make your guests feel inferior.
If we haven't done that, we're not doing something right.
That's funny.
Oh man. Don't worry, we'll get them later. I find it interesting. You take those moments that we do forget a lot of the masters. And I can remember coming to Caps one night, and I got there early, and Sergio got there early.
Wow.
And I can remember sitting with Sergio for almost 45 minutes, just him and I, and just he's telling me stories of how he got started and things that he did and why he did. And it blew me away.
Yeah.
And you're right. I don't think we appreciate the level of expertise that has come before us at times. It's quite easy to forget. And you really made me pause to think that, we're looking at the guys that are working now and not the guys that have gone before us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to know those guys before us, And, in Sergio's case here, you got a guy who's in his 80s and he's still drawing circles around everybody.
Oh, yeah.
That guy is amazing.
And his level of detail and perspective of, it just blows me away.
Yep. He's just absolutely incredible. Oh, yeah.
And what I love about that is that means there's a long, happy future ahead, right? I mean, when people talk about retiring or something, I'm like, I love to draw. I'm not going to retire from that.
Well, from Sergio's mouth, I think he said it was cigars and booze and something else.
There's my problem.
Oh, funny.
So what are ways that we can give back? We talked about doing video recordings and having our own conversations, but can you think of any other pieces of advice you might give to the next generation coming up?
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing. I do get emails from people sometimes, kids, asking about art as a career and stuff. And I'm always happy to, as long as it doesn't have to necessarily be a phone call, I don't mind responding to emails when I have the time in between my projects to critique or just talk to them about whatever questions they have. So that happens from time to time. It is funny though, how, like I was saying earlier, how people they ask for advice and then they get defensive about their work. I've come across that a lot in younger folks who are trying to learn the business. Um, and I get it because I remember being in those shoes, but you got, like I said earlier, you got to remember, listen to those people who, if you like someone's work enough that you're asking them for advice, then listen to the advice and try not to get defensive about it.
Well, I think also go into the attitude, I'm not here to take your job. I'm here to work with you and learn.
Well,
You
that's what
know?
we hope. We hope they're not trying to take our
Well,
jobs.
I was talking to a good friend of mine, and he works for an animation studio, and he said there was a whole group that came in, and their whole attitude was, "I'm here to take your job."
Yeah.
And they were all young, and he was like, "Wait a second, what happened to working together?"
Yeah.
And such. And I see that. I think a lot of I can remember being young and having aspirations going, oh, I want to draw this. And then I found myself and I realized, no, I don't want to draw that. I want to do what I want to do. And
There's that independent streak coming out.
I have, that's all Bill's fault. It is all Stout's fault on that one. But, but I also think one of the joy is when you see someone take the advice and do something with it. And I've got a couple of kids that I've looked at their portfolios over, it's when they were 13 or 14, and now they're in their 20s and they're on their fourth and fifth books, and they get it. And I can remember them coming up to me going, thank you for the advice. And I said, look, all I ask is that you just pass it on to someone else, and that's kind of what happened to me. People were willing to tell me stuff without any expectations to it, just to see me succeed. And I think giving back is just as important, that we need to return that favor.
Yeah.
I think that's important. It's interesting. As a teacher myself, I found that I have a hard time giving bad news to students because I think I had a hard time taking bad news as a student. So when someone comes to me for a critique, I have this little, like in an instant, I have this thought process that goes, okay, how do I give them encouragement at the same time as not, discouraging them, because it took a lot of courage to show me what they're showing me. I don't want to, crush their dreams, but at the same time, I want to be objective and give them good advice. And so sometimes it's hard for me to give really honest advice because I'm afraid that if I come on too strong, I might just crush their spirit. And I hate that.
I always ask up front.
Yeah.
I say, what would you like? Would you like me to just look through it and enjoy your work? Or would you like me to look through it and we can talk about where you can go with it?
That's a good approach.
And then I've got the balls in their court. If they just want me to look at it and enjoy it, I look at it and I enjoy it. I appreciate it. And if they want more than that, I'm willing to, and then we sit down and we talk.
Yeah.
And that also shows me how bad they kind of want it. If they're willing to take that extra step, it's kind of a indicator of what I can do or what I can say.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, I think too, sometimes, I don't know, there is an attitude amongst some artists or professionals, probably anywhere, that you gotta knock the newbies down a few pegs, whether or not they're good. You just got to hit them, haze them a little bit. And I've never been that way. I can't do that. I don't know if you guys have experienced that. I have in my career in a number of places that people just, they haze you.
They wanted to slap you?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I've never liked that attitude. I like instead.
I don't know who you talk to. I must have met the right people because everybody's been very friendly.
Well, I've certainly had some really bad critiques that have gone really bad. I've had some portfolio reviews that were not very fun. I've had teachers, I remember in college one time, I was in my first freshman year drawing class. And the teacher just kind of told me, this isn't working. And she was just really harsh. And I was like, really? It's not that bad. And she was like, from that point on, I was like enemy number one in her class. She just wanted to teach me a lesson. And it's not that I was being obstinate or arrogant, but I felt like her critique wasn't fair. I don't know.
She was singling you out.
Yeah. She just wanted me to be humble. And I admit it, I was probably a little cocky, but at the same time, I didn't take her seriously because I never saw her draw. And I was like, prove to me that you know what you're telling me kind of thing.
Well, I think you've just picked up on something there that is something that I thought of earlier, where when someone's giving the critique, it's hard to take it if you don't know what the reputation is of the person critiquing you.
Yeah.
So if you don't trust them as a professional and giving you a critique, then don't even ask for it, if you're asking for a critique, because you need to respect the person who's giving the critique, and then you can believe what they're saying is true.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What a great point there.
All right, who wants to share next?
I've had critiques from recruiters. I'm like, well, you don't draw.
Well, and maybe that's part of it for me is I spent a lot of time working as a graphic designer, and in that world, you're trying to please so many different people that had varying degrees of artistic awareness and ability, and so you're taking critiques from the boss's nephew, and you're like, really?
Yeah. I'll tell you this, I did work at a studio once, I won't say where, but I had the way the setup was when I was doing character design work, and I had to give my work to a PA who would then give it to the director, and the director would give him notes, which would then come back to me. I didn't have that interaction directly with the director. And after a few weeks, I was realizing, I came to realize that some of the notes that the PA was giving me were his own feelings about it.
Oh.
It was his first ever job in animation, and he was telling me what he thought. And the whole time he was making me think it was coming from the director. And then I got in trouble because the director finally came to me and goes, why do you keep doing this way? I'm like, well, he tells me I should. He tells me it's coming from you. He goes, I didn't tell him that. So yeah. So that I was not a happy camper. I'm all about helping out somebody who's new in the business, but that got me in trouble for something, and I was not pleased at all.
I would have killed the guy.
Yeah.
Would not have felt bad.
All right, so what do we call this piece, Travis?
I have no idea. Mayhem.
Ode to Monster.
That's right.
They look like a little family or a team or something. I can't tell,
It might be a team. I'm actually thinking I got to turn this into a coloring page, for next week. I try really hard since everybody's been indoors. I do 3 coloring pages a week for people to just download and play with.
What? Wow.
And that just gives people a chance to enjoy something else. And I, one of the things that I've learned, and especially with being an independent illustrator, is the more I give back, the more work I have. It's amazing how that seems to work.
Well, yeah, that's because you're doing 3 extra drawings a week for free.
Well,
that's the more work you got.
This will end up in a coloring book anyways. But the cool thing about it is people it gets shared and passed around and seen, and I never know who's going to see it. And then I get a game company call me up and go, hey, we want you to do this game because we saw this that you did. And all of a sudden, my workload right now, I haven't. Everybody else I know is like, well, I don't have much to do but work on my own projects. And I'm going, I can't work on my own projects because I'm working on everybody else's projects. So it's definitely, and being able to sketch quickly helps quite a bit. Like it'll take me another hour to ink this. So, I usually take my Saturday or Sunday afternoons and crank out the 3 pages.
And you're doing it all digitally?
Yeah, I do it all digitally. That way it just makes it quicker for me. I'm about 30% faster digitally because of Control Z.
Yeah.
And I can change stuff around and add things and move things around, and I really like to do that. So You know, and this is kind of basically it. I think I've got it kind of down. And it took me about 30 minutes to pull that out.
Wow.
Like I said, one day I want to be like Sergio. One day.
Yeah.
Well,
But
you gotta grow that mustache, Travis.
Well, yeah, I got to get the right wax for it too, you know, to make it perfect.
I sometimes wonder, Tom Luth being Sergio's colorist, I sometimes wonder if he gets a page and he just goes, "Oh no."
I know. I would say. I've wondered if Stan Sakai's gotten a page and said, "Oh no." So yeah.
Oh man.
So these are my little beasties.
That's
Very cool.
great.
So.
Chad, you want to show us another view of yours?
Yeah, sure. Let me. I don't think I. Go ahead. What do you say?
I was saying my head was getting sweaty, so I took my hat off and then realized how bad my hair was and said, "No, I gotta keep the hat on."
You put the hat back on. Hey, why don't you just go ahead and turn off your camera, Travis?
Oh, jeez. All the love.
I didn't say that, so
That's okay. Okay, Patrick and I go way back. Almost too far.
I don't think I've really done too much to the original drawing.
Oh, that's fine.
But I did another one since then. So.
Oh.
Oh, I like that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
It reminds me of Hunchback of Notre Dame a little bit.
Oh, well, there you go.
That style, which I enjoyed. I didn't care for the movie that much, but I enjoyed the design on the gargoyles.
You know, something I've been trying to work on in my own drawings is expressions. Do you have any tips for expressions? Nice.
That's awesome. Oh, I love that.
I like it.
Just a quick Frankenstein is something when I get stuck, because I was feeling like I was getting stuck in that other one. I was just like, I just got to draw Frankenstein. I got to get something else out.
See, you pulled off 2 drawings, so you got.
And then you stopped me, and I just started another one. But yeah. So.
Nice
awesome.
work.
Yeah, but you did like 10 in 1, Travis. So come on.
Yeah.
All that caffeine this morning.
Well, and looking at your drawings, Chad, I'm curious. You know, I'm trying to improve expressions in my own work. Is there anything you do to practice expressions and, you know, get kind of that cartoon feeling? What do you do?
Honestly, I think that just comes from me having worked in animation so much, because even as a storyboard artist, I'm basically acting. So with scripts and listening to vocal tracks and stuff, I'm drawing faces based on what I hear, what I read. So I have to run the gamut of expression. And of course, too, as a character designer, that's part of the job too, is creating whole sheets of expressions, trying to imagine all these different things that they can do with their faces. So I think it just kind of comes from doing the animation works, and then it does fall into my illustration work a little bit too that way. So, but that's the thing. You want to create characters with personality, and personality comes with expression. So that's kind of a key thing, I would think.
Do you find yourself, you know, observing from life, or if you're trying to work on an expression, you got a mirror? I've heard other animators have mirrors and stuff.
Well, the whole wall behind me is actually a closet that's mirrors, but I covered it with drawings. So no, I don't really look in the mirror too much. I just, it's just, for me, it's been a lot about imagination, just trying to get it to come out, whatever the design of the face is, you know, especially when we're cartooning, it's not necessarily realistic. So depending on what production I'm on, I can exaggerate more than others, but, and if you're doing it for a director who has a very specific idea, then you do what he wants, or she. But yeah, that's, I don't know, it's one of those things that's become second nature. So I don't really put a lot of thought into it, other than this is the kind of face I think it should have for this particular moment. So
this is great. I love it.
Yeah.
I love his face. I like his eyes.
Yeah.
Something about his eyes.
Travis, you were talking about coloring pages. I did one, I don't know, about a month ago that I hand inked. This is not digital.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that?
Not yet.
Oh, am I showing the whole screen, or am I only showing Photoshop?
We see
You're only
just
showing
Frankie.
Photoshop.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see. Let me switch screens then. Is it showing up
Oh.
yet?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
there it is.
great. I love that.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, that was hand inked. So,
Oh, that's great.
and I don't know. You were talking about being faster with digital inking. Um, in a weird way, I almost feel like it takes me the same amount of time to hand ink as opposed to digital ink, because I keep noodling it when I'm digital inking.
Yeah, that's true. I do noodle a little bit. I
Yeah.
get the same vibe. I ink on vellum when I ink.
Oh, okay.
I just love that feel.
Yeah.
But once I went digital, it was just so much easier for me to just flow once I found the right pens and stuff. And a lot of it, though, is just how I was trained. My first job was at a print shop as a cartoonist, and we were doing 75 cartoons a week.
Oh,
So it
wow.
was just like, get it done, get it done, get it done. And so now I'm learning to go, okay, it's okay to slow down. It's okay to take a little bit of time. So, but this is great. I love the style and the feel of it. And the line work is just beautiful.
And even when I do traditional work, I'll do my rough sketches in Photoshop first, because especially with something like this, then I can position I'll draw the monsters on different layers and then position them. And when I get my composition where I want it, then I'll print it out on layout bond, and then I'll use my light table, So, but yeah, this is just kind of how this one turned out.
What a great piece.
I recently did a monster painting. I'm currently working as the chairman of the Society of Illustrators of LA's Illustration West contest.
Oh, good. I was going to ask you about that if you wanted to talk about it.
No, Patrick, I don't. Yeah. So I did this as a traditional painting. I used it. Well, this is kind of a little pixelated, unfortunately.
Can Riverside people enter this contest?
People around the world can enter this, yes. But I did this in watercolor, gouache, and colored pencil, and then digitally I put the comic book dots on it. But just kind of having fun. I wanted to do it like a 1950s poster type of thing, So I ended up looking online for a lot of reference, and all the posters that I was looking at that I wanted to use as reference ended up all being by the same guy. It's all by an illustrator named Reynold Brown. And I discovered this because I have a book of Reynold Brown work, and I started flipping through it, and I'm going, oh, I didn't realize this was his, and I didn't realize that was his. It was all his work. It was like all these monster posters of the couple running away from the monster.
That's hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that turned out really beautifully, and I'm
Thanks.
really impressed to hear that's hand painted. I love that.
Totally hand painted, except like I said, except for the dots. So, but it was fun. And I had a buddy named Andy Heckathorn who designed the text for me on it.
Great.
He's an illustrator too, but he does a lot of graphic design working for Penn State, and he did that for me. But yeah, we just launched it on May 18th, and the contest is live, and it's good until October 31st. And you were asking me earlier about artists that I know. That's the one thing I love. You were talking about how so many artists are generous in wanting to talk to you, and we all work from home, most of us. Sometimes we work in studios with other people. Over the years, I've gotten to know a bunch of people, and so many of them said yes to being judges on my panel this year. So we have illustrators like Drew Struzan.
Wow.
Jason Sealer, who is super amazing with caricatures and realistic stuff. He does Time Magazine stuff. C.F. Payne.
Wow.
Justin Gerard, who's on the younger side. He does beautiful fantasy work. Claire Keene, who herself comes from a long lineage of artists.
Yeah.
Her dad being Glenn Keene, her grandfather was Bill Keene, who created Family Circus.
I have a neat story of Glenn
Wow.
Keene.
Yeah, a lot of great people being on the panel, and that's all just from having friendships over the years with other artists.
So
I
Chad,
love that.
I got to sit next to
Yeah.
Glenn at a convention once, and we were chatting, and I asked him, I said, all right, I want to know who you were. What character were you that your father created? And he looked at me dead straight, and he says, I was Jeffrey.
Wait. Glenn said that?
Yes.
I thought he was Billy. Jeff is Jeffy.
No, he said he was Jeffrey.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. That's
Maybe he's
amazing.
taking a shot at his brother or something.
That's funny.
Well, that sounds really awesome, Chad.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's enough time between now and October for Travis to finish a piece, but
Hey.
but I think I'll definitely enter.
He's got pieces. He's already drawn circles around us today in this hour.
I'm already thinking what I could do.
Look, he drew that one behind him right before we got on air here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has been a fun chat, you guys. I'm really
pull yours up, Patrick, so we can see yours. You
Yeah,
gotta
let's
finish
see
it
yours.
off. You know.
really all right. Let's see what we got here. Prepared to not be amazed.
Oh, I am amazed.
Oh, dude, yours totally looks like pencil.
That's my favorite brush on the Procreate. I got a pencil that mimics a 6B.
Wow, that's a great look. I've never quite been able to figure it out in Photoshop to get something that looks pencil-y.
That's one of my favorite things about working in Procreate is I found some brushes that feel like pencils, and I even put like a matte finish screen cover on my tablet, so it has a tooth a little bit like paper. So I'm really happy.
Clip Studio Paint's the same way. You've got these two new illustration programs that are out that are just amazing what you can do with.
Wow, that's very cool.
Well, like I was saying, you guys, this is fun and informative, but we have one final question.
Uh-oh.
And Chad, you get to go first. The question is, why do you make art?
Oh, because I have to. It's just, I've always done it. I'm one of those kids who, my mom, when I was 5 years old, every year on our birthday, she would ask me and my siblings what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I always said artist. So it's always been in my heart. And I'm glad that I can do it as a career, because not everybody who likes to do art can do it as a career. And I guess that makes me happy, because that means people like looking at it. If I can get paid to do it, then that means there's a demand for what I'm doing, and then other people are enjoying it. And that gives me a lot of satisfaction too, if people like what I'm doing. So, although when I ask for an honest critique, I mean, give me an honest critique. So if you don't like it, tell me.
It's either tell me you like it or you don't. It's the guy that doesn't tell me anything that drives me nuts.
Yes, yeah.
My mom always said, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Yeah. I do have an art teacher from college. When my first book came out, everybody was all excited about it. All my friends, other teachers were excited about it. And he came into the room when my classmates were looking through this book. And they go, "Look, Chad did a book." And he just looked down at it, crossed his arms, and he went,
Was that because he hadn't done a book yet?
I don't know. I don't know his bibliography, so I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, it was published. I didn't really need a critique at that point, so I couldn't change it.
Too late.
So, but now, of course, I'll look at it and I'll do the same thing.
What is this?
Yeah, no, that was a kid's first effort. That's what it was. So,
Well, keep on keeping on. I totally agree with you. Your sentiment about making art. That's just, art is in my heart too. How about you, Trav? What do you think?
I don't know. I think it keeps the demons in my head at bay.
No, today we needed those to come out on the paper.
And they did, and they
We're
showed
drawing
up.
those demons.
No, I find it to be for the same reason. I like to do it. And the other thing is I find it as a release, just an emotional release. And even if I wasn't making money at this, I would still draw just because I like that release.
Yep.
I would. I think I'd still be drawing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I would.
Yeah.
I've always drawn, and doodle in class, doodle in work meetings, doodle everywhere. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So, so guys, we have reached the end of our conversation today. I really appreciate your time. This has been fun.
Yeah, it's been great.
I'd like to hear, Chad, anything else you want to pitch, or where can people find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram. I have private and a public Facebook page, but if you see it says Chad Frye Illustration Guy, that's my public one. So, and same thing with Instagram is Chad Frye Illustration Guy. Those places, and I post my sketches a lot because I'm not always doing paintings, but I do lots of sketching, and that's what I'll post a lot of. So, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And you, Trav, where can people find you?
And find me at the Facebook fan page of Life of the Party, which updates daily. And then you can find me also under Travis Hanson, basically anywhere. Just be careful what you Google, because sometimes the other Travis Hanson might show up.
Yeah, and as always, you can find me, Patrick Scullin, Instagram, Twitter, and other places, Facebook too. So, and now Talk and Draw. So, guys,
Cool.
Thanks again for coming and hanging out. We're gonna sign off.
All right. Cool. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. This has been great.
See you guys later.
Take care.